Here's Chris Wallace's interview with Dr. Ben Carson. I got issues with Carson, and I'll just leave it at that and make my comments regarding this particular interview as it goes.
Now to Dr. Ben Carson, who is a top Trump advisor and took the nominee to his hometown of Detroit. Dr. Carson, Trump has been on the campaign trail now for 15 months. This was his first trip to an inner city for a public event with African Americans. First, what took him so long? And secondly, what do you think his trip accomplished?
Well, first of all, I recognize that traditionally the Republican Party has not made an extensive outreach to certain communities, including the African American community, because they've pretty much written that off as Democrat territory. Donald Trump is changing that narrative and is really starting to talk about this in a very serious way. And I've had many discussions with him about it. He becomes very animated during those discussions, and this is a subject about which he cares deeply.
That's bullshit. If he got very, in his words, animated about things, where the hell has he been for the past 30 goddamn years, okay? All the business opportunities that he could have laid at the hands of black contractors, that's all by the wayside, okay? He's gotten animated. So you mean you're the first black person that has discussed black issues with Donald Trump, and now he's becoming animated? Yeah, right, animated.
And what is going to be accomplished is something that many in the Democrat Party fear, and that is an alternative to, promises that are not kept. And look at the situation that's going on in our inner cities with the school systems. Look at the incarceration rates that are going on, the broken homes, out of wedlock births, the economic situation. This is not.
See, now, okay, let me be civil about this. Black people have been looking for an alternative. It's called contesting, wooing for our votes. Very few Republicans actually want to or attempt to contest or woo for the black vote. That's why black people vote for Democrats, because at least they make an effort to address the fact that we have a vote, and they don't put in a lot of bullshit laws to try to restrict our vote. If the Republicans did the same thing, they went after our vote in a meaningful, even-keeled manner, and stopped trying to restrict our vote, and put forth policies that we agreed with that were helpful, instead of trying to strangle us, they would get more votes. So Dr. Carson got a lot of nerve talking about the Democrats are now afraid because Donald Trump made one visit to a safe zone, gave one RNC scrub speech, and now all of a sudden he's wooing, he's contesting for our vote. Yeah, right.
Good, and of course it doesn't apply to all blacks, but we have a substantial number of blacks living in our inner cities, and if our inner cities are weak and are not prospering, how can the entire nation prosper? And that is really the goal.
But let me pick up on that, Dr. Carson. Trump laid out what he called a civil rights agenda for our time: education, safe streets, good jobs. I want to talk about the first of those. He calls for school choice, but we looked in all of his speeches during this campaign, we looked on his campaign website, and nowhere does he explain what he means by school choice, how it would work, and how he would pay for it.
Well, it is assumed that people know that school choice means you get a choice of your school. You're not necessarily assigned to a school because of where you live And if that school happens to be dysfunctional, you just suffer the consequences. That is something that we want to change. We want to give people a choice by a voucher system. And it's very interesting that many people in the political arena are against vouchers and school choice, and yet they send their own children to very prestigious private schools. We're fully recognizing that if you give a person a good education, it doesn't matter what their racial or economic background is, they basically will be able to write their own ticket. This should be a very high priority for us, and it was for those who founded this country. And they talked about the need for an educated and well-informed society, particularly Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson.
But let me pick up on that, because Trump has also called for abolishing the Department of Education, which gives out $1.4 billion a year in what's called Title I funds for schools that are dealing with impoverished students. Here's what Hillary Clinton had to say about Trump and his outreach to African Americans.
It really does take a lot of nerve to ask people he's ignored and mistreated for decades, what do you have to lose? Because the answer is everything.
Dr. Carson, how do you respond to Clinton?
I would simply respond by saying it's really the Democratic Party that has the explaining to do. They've been in charge of our cities for a long time. The city I grew up in, Detroit, was once the most prosperous city in the United States. Some people say in the world. From there, it went to the largest bankruptcy. That was not a coincidence. And we see that in our large cities across.
Dr. Carson, yeah, that wasn't a coincidence. And you want to know why that occurred? Very simply, everybody in Detroit was prospering, white, black, in between. The white people decided white flight was a good idea, okay? So they took their home equities, their pensions, and went to the suburbs. Okay. Black people basically quasi, and I do say quasi, did the same thing. Well, the value of property started to decline, okay? And the value of property is what drives property tax. Meanwhile, okay, as more and more people are moving out of the city of Detroit, okay, and into the suburbs, Detroit's tax base started to drop as far as income taxes, etc., that they were receiving, okay? But they still were on the hook for pensions. Now I'm talking taxes, etc., regarding city employees, etc., all the pensions, teachers, etc. All these people are out in the suburbs. All these people are buying food, clothing, whatever, at the stores in the suburbs. Detroit's tax base drops. They still have a major liability as far as paying pensions, etc., etc. Then, to make matters worse, the state steps in and starts squeezing them. Because Mr. Carson is right, Detroit has been primarily controlled by Democrats. But the state, when it became controlled by Republicans, have great ways of squeezing out cities as far as revenues that should be going to cities that they restrict. On top of that, you had the mayor of Detroit who embezzled, or he stole a lot of money. He's in jail right now. And you had the school board, the head of the school board, did the same thing. Now, while all this is going on, the school board had floated out a $1 billion bond, okay, in order to modernize schools, structures, books, etc., all, physical things. No teacher salaries, but all physical improvements and computers, etc. Well, the governor appointed an emergency manager, both over the city of Detroit and over the school board. It was actually the emergency manager of the city of Detroit that actually took it into bankruptcy. It wasn't the former mayor. And I'm still, and I do mean this, I am still looking to see what happened to that $1 billion that they received from that bond, because the Detroit schools are totally in the toilet, and there are federal lawsuits going on right now regarding the condition of those schools. So the governor of Michigan has got a lot of stuff to answer to, not just that Flint water crisis. Anyway, I digress. Let's continue.
The nation under Democratic control. That is a problem. And when that is happening, what Donald Trump is saying, why would you continue down that same pathway? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result.
The definition of insanity is knowing that the action that you take in picking a poor choice is going to result in anything good. Donald Trump is a racist. Okay? He's a racist. Sorry, he's a racist. Donald Trump may have business experience, but he's got no experience anyplace else. So the man that talks about making a deal is going to be run by people that he may or may not trust. But as far as his being a good judge of character, especially in the political realm, I point you to Mr. Manafort, I point you to Mr. Bannon, and I point you to Mr. Bossie, and let's not forget about Roger Ailes.
The result will not be different. Now, he's talking about some real clear things. We've had some in-depth discussions about the $2.1 trillion that are overseas. Repatriating that money with no taxes, with the stipulation that 10% of it has to be used in enterprise zones and to create jobs for people who are unemployed, underemployed, or on welfare. You want to talk about a stimulus? That would be the biggest stimulus since FDR's New Deal, and it wouldn't cost the taxpayers one penny, and it also gets corporate America once again involved in their communities, which they...
Except that the countries where the money is, they're basically those companies have already paid taxes on that money, so they are not going to have to pay any additional tax to leave it there, and they can do what they want with the money, not have quote-unquote 10% mandated to be invested in certain areas. So that plan doesn't work.
It used to be before the government took over and made a mess of it.
Dr. Carson, Trump has a Hispanic advisory council, but after his hardline speech on immigration this week, several members of that council quit. Here's one of them.
It was not a Republican speech. It was not a compassionate speech. I was very disappointed, and I'm not going to be part of that.
Question: Do you
know what I would say?
Do you worry that you're being used as a prop for black voters, and that supporting Donald Trump will end up hurting your credibility in the black community?
It already has.
It's not about me. It's a long time ago. It's not about me. It's about our nation. But I would suggest, Chris, go back and look at the 1995 State of the Union address by Bill Clinton.
All right. I'm going to let him finish that. But Chris missed a question in there. His question should have been, what do you say to the guy that just quit? And what's your comment? Because Carson was getting ready to answer, but Chris let him off the hook. Okay, let's go into the Clinton deal.
And see what he said. He said, illegal aliens are creating big problems for us, and we're going to put a lot more Border Patrol people on and secure our borders, and we're not going to have people able to work who come in illegally, and we're going to cut off their welfare benefits, and we're going to deport people in record numbers. You know, he says basically the same thing.
No, you forgot to add that he called Mexicans, most, not all, quote unquote, coming across that border, rapists and criminals. And then he said, and he assumes that there were some good people coming across that border too. Bill Clinton didn't do that. And that is a major difference. That's where the racist term comes from, Ben.
But when he says it, wow, great standing ovation, this is a great president. And when Trump says it, it's hate speech. What hypocrisy. What incredible hypocrisy.
I've got about a minute left, and I got to ask you one final question, and that is about the fact that the FBI released its files this week into the investigation of Hillary Clinton and her use of a private email system. Your reaction to the facts that were released?
Well, it's very troublesome. You know, she claims not to remember many things. Do you want somebody with inability to remember in the White House? Or do you want somebody who is...
Well, Bannon, if you voted for Reagan, I guess you had somebody who had the inability to remember, because he damn sure didn't remember any of the details about the guns for hostages that he was a participant in. So you need to remember your history before you start making statements like that, because you guys all swear by St. Ronald Reagan.
Prevaricator in the White House. Well, you get a choice. Or do you want to maybe go in a completely different direction altogether? You know, everything is a coincidence. I know it looks bad, but you know, it's not really that way. And we're really very honest people. And we don't use our office to enrich ourselves. I know it looks that way and everything points in that direction, but believe us, we're wonderful people. I think at some point people begin to see through that.
Dr. Carson, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you. Thanks for your time on this holiday weekend, sir.
All right, so that's Dr. Ben's interview on Fox. At least Chris pretty much keeps most of his guests right on point. And I honestly, even when I disagree with him, I do enjoy his interviews.